What if power lies in cessation? In the hidden chambers of ancient temples, sages would sit in stillness, not for minutes, but for days, even years. No chants, no teachings, no speech, just silence. And yet, when they emerged, their presence alone could calm storms of the mind, ignite visions, or awaken something dormant in others. Why? Because silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of everything. In a world that rewards noise, demands expression, and drowns truth beneath endless chatter, silence has become a forgotten art. But to the mystic, to the initiated, silence is a portal, a tuning fork for the soul, a force that doesn't just soothe the mind, it awakens the divine within. In this video, we'll explore the hidden power of silence, why ancient and modern spiritual masters alike have chosen prolonged silence as a gateway to higher wisdom. We'll journey through history and philosophy to uncover why sacred silence has been revered in nearly every mystical tradition. Then we'll dive deep into the spiritual mechanics of silence. What actually happens when you stop speaking, and how it rewires the body, the mind, and the spirit. We'll also reveal practical techniques you can use to cultivate this force in your own life, even amidst chaos. Whether you're on a path of awakening, healing, or simply seeking peace, this forgotten power could be the key you've been missing. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the noise of the world or the noise within your own mind, this video may offer you something rare, a return to stillness, and a remembrance of the self behind the sound. Across time and tradition, silence has been more than a behavior, it has been a spiritual technology. In the sacred texts of the Vedas, silence is known as mananat, merely the absence of speech, but the stillness of being. Ancient rishis, or seers, would enter periods of extended mana to access truths beyond words. It was believed that only in silence could one hear the soundless sound, the anahatanata mystical vibration said to be the subtle hum of creation itself. In Buddhist philosophy, silence is not escape, it is presence. The Buddha himself, when asked certain metaphysical questions about the afterlife, the nature of the soul, or the limits of the universe, would often remain silent. This was not avoidance, it was transmission, a teaching beyond language. As the Zen saying goes, "Those who know do not speak, those who speak do not know." In the Desert Fathers tradition of early Christian mysticism, silence was considered a weapon against illusion. These hermits withdrew from society not to abandon the world, but to confront the world within. They understood that the tongue is a gate, and to keep it closed was to protect the inner sanctuary from contamination. Sufi mystics too practiced intentional silence called samto, draw closer to the beloved. In Sufism, silence was not passivity. It was a listening to the divine whisper between heartbeats. Rumi, the great Sufi poet, once wrote, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." Even in Western esotericism, silence is one of the four powers of the magus: to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. This final command, to keep silent, was not about secrecy alone. It was about containment of energy, the ability to hold power without dissipating it through unnecessary speech. And in Hermetic texts, silence was seen as the guardian of sacred knowledge. The initiate was instructed to speak only when words would serve truth, and to withhold speech when the listener was not yet ready. This wasn't arrogance, it was alignment, a recognition that truth revealed too soon becomes distortion. These threads converge on a deeper truth. Silence is a discipline of the soul. It is the crucible in which the ego burns away, leaving behind only essence. When the noise of personality subsides, what remains is pure awareness. In every tradition, silence was not avoided, was a presence, a space in which divine knowledge, healing, and transformation could occur. And those who mastered it were not mute, they were luminous. As we enter the next section, we'll look at what makes silence such a potent force, not just symbolically, but energetically and neurologically. What actually happens to the mind, the spirit, and the field around us when we choose not to speak. Silence is not empty. It is charged with intelligence, with presence, with power. And when practiced consciously, it becomes a spiritual force that reshapes the very landscape of the soul. At the surface, silence appears passive, but in truth, it is one of the most active states a person can enter. In silence, you are not just withholding words, you are reclaiming energy. Every word you speak is a release of life force. And so, to be silent is to contain, to gather, to amplify that energy inward. This is the first secret of silence, energy conservation. Just as water held still becomes a mirror, so too does the mind in silence reflect higher truths. When the voice rests, attention turns inward, the senses settle, the scattered currents of thought begin to unify, and from that stillness arises something rare in the modern world: clarity. On a neurological level, silence has profound effects. Studies have shown that 2 minutes of silence can be more restorative for the brain than 2 minutes of relaxing music. In prolonged silence, the brain begins to shift into alpha and theta wave states, associated with meditation, creativity, and heightened intuition. It is in these brain states that many mystics receive visions, insights, or spontaneous understanding. Why? Because in silence, the mind stops listening outward and begins listening upward and inward. Energetically, silence strengthens the auric field. Think of your aura as a luminous membrane that reflects your inner state. When we speak unconsciously complaining, gossiping, over-explaining, we create holes in that membrane. But when we become silent with intention, the aura thickens, it seals, it becomes a temple of stillness, resistant to external interference. This is why advanced spiritual practitioners often become quieter the further they progress. It's not that they have nothing to say, it's that they no longer need to say it. Their presence communicates more than words ever could. They understand that speech dilutes presence, and presence is their instrument of transformation. Another mystical aspect of silence is what we could call the dissolution of identity. Our personality is largely shaped and reinforced by what we say. I am this. I believe that. I want this. When we stop speaking, the ego begins to lose its grip. A subtler awareness emerges that isn't defined by opinions, memories, or labels. This awareness is what many traditions refer to as the true self, the soul, beneath the mask. But silence is not always comfortable. In fact, it can be profoundly confronting. The first thing it reveals is the noise we carry within the anxious thoughts, the inner critic, the echoes of unresolved emotion. This is why so many people fear silence, and not because it is empty, but because it reflects what they've been running from. Yet, this discomfort is the gateway. The mystic knows what arises in silence is not your enemy, it is your curriculum. In the next part, we'll explore how silence creates spiritual magnetism, how it becomes a channel for divine intelligence, and why certain teachings were designed to be received only in silence, not spoken, but directly experienced. If the first power of silence is stillness and clarity, the second is magnetism. There is a reason why the most advanced spiritual masters say less. Their words may be few, but their presence speaks volumes. This is not because they are withholding wisdom, but because they are anchored in it. And that anchoring creates a field, a gravitational pull around them. People feel it. Animals are drawn to it. Even chaotic situations seem to settle in their presence. Why? Because silence is not just a lack of sound, it is the alignment of internal frequencies. When a person is in deep silence, they begin to resonate with universal laws. The inner noise of fear, comparison, egoic grasping dissolves. What remains is a human being in tune with the natural rhythm of the cosmos. And that rhythm creates resonance. This resonance is what makes a master's silence more powerful than 1,000 lectures. It's what turns their gaze into a mirror, their stillness into instruction. In yogic language, this is the quality of Shakti spiritual energy that radiates from a person who has stilled the fluctuations of the mind. Silence also serves as a channel for higher intelligence. Many esoteric schools teach that the divine voice is not loud. It does not compete with the mind. It is subtle, like a whisper beneath the current of thought. And unless we quiet ourselves, we will not hear it. This is why some teachings are transmitted in silence. In the presence of certain sages, disciples enter states of deep realization without a single word exchanged. What occurs is vibrational transmission. The teaching is not spoken, it is received. Not through the intellect, but through the heart. This is known in some traditions as Shaktipat, or direct spiritual initiation. Certain mysteries, especially those related to non-duality, cannot be explained with language. Language divides. It creates subject and object, before and after, here and there. But the truth of your being, your eternal nature, is beyond duality. And so, the only way to know it is to experience it directly in silence. This is why the Hermetic axiom advises, the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. It means that the greatest truths are not taught, they are realized, and realization arises in the fertile soil of stillness. There is also a subtle esoteric truth. Silence protects the sacred. When we speak too soon of spiritual experiences, we dilute them. We expose them to interpretation, comparison, and doubt. Ancient mystics often went into silence after deep visions, not because they were confused, but because they were integrating. They knew that speaking prematurely could scatter the energy, that words, once spoken, change the alchemy of an experience. This is why the deeper your spiritual journey goes, the more you are drawn into sacred silence, not out of isolation, but out of reverence. In this way, silence becomes a sanctuary, not just from the noise of the world, but from the noise of the self. It becomes a place where you no longer need to be anything, say anything, prove anything. You simply are. And in that being, you discover the truth that all the mystics spoke of in their own silent way. You are not the voice. You are the presence beneath it. In the next section, we'll explore how to bring the power of silence into your own life. Whether for a few minutes a day or in extended retreats, you'll learn how to cultivate this sacred force and what to expect as you deepen your practice. Silence. Timeless power in a noisy world. The good news is, you don't need to disappear into a monastery or retreat to the mountains to access its magic. You can begin where you are. The doorway to sacred silence is closer than your next breath. Create daily micro-silence rituals. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Choose a quiet place. Sit without distraction. No music, no screens, no goals. Simply breathe and observe. This isn't meditation with mantras or techniques, it's the pure act of presence. The mind may race, but let it. Do not engage. Over time, these small pockets of silence become sacred wells of renewal. You can expand this gradually 10 minutes, then 20. What matters is not the duration, but the depth of your stillness. Practice mana, conscious speech restraint. Borrowing from the yogic tradition, designate a period each day or even an entire day per week where you refrain from speaking unless absolutely necessary. Observe how your energy shifts. Notice the compulsion to fill silence with noise. Mana reveals how often we speak from habit, not awareness. It teaches us to choose our words like spells carefully and with intention. Silent morning or evening windows. One powerful practice is to bookend your day with silence. Begin each morning in stillness. Let the first sounds you hear be internal, not external. Similarly, end the day with quiet reflection. Before sleep, resist the urge to speak, scroll, or even journal. Let silence be the bridge into rest. These transition points anchor your day in awareness. Silence during tasks. Sacred doing. Bring silence into your actions. Eat a meal in silence. Walk without earbuds. Clean, cook, or create without commentary. Allow your body to act while your mind rests. These moments become meditations in motion, simple acts infused with presence. Use silence as a response tool in conversation. Try pausing before you speak. Breathe. Listen not just to the words, but to the energy beneath them. Often, silence is the most powerful response, especially in moments of tension, misunderstanding, or emotional heat. Silence disarms the ego and allows truth to surface. Enter a silent retreat when ready. If you feel called, consider attending a formal silent retreat. Even a weekend of deep silence can recalibrate your entire system. But be gentle, such depth can stir buried thoughts and emotions. The silence will not judge you. It will reveal you. And in that revelation, healing begins. Honor the integration period. After deep silence, avoid the urge to rush back into noise. Give yourself space to process. Journal if needed. Walk slowly. Let your words return gradually, like guests invited into a freshly cleaned home. As you deepen your relationship with silence, you'll begin to notice subtle shifts. Your nervous system becomes more regulated. Your intuition sharpens. Your words, when spoken, carry more power. And your presence begins to affect others, without effort, without volume, without performance. You become what the mystics call a silent lamp radiating truth. Not by preaching it, but by being it. The more you practice, the more you realize. Silence is not something you do. It is something you remember. A state of being that has always been there waiting patiently beneath the noise. In a world addicted to noise, silence is a rebellion and a return. A return to the self that existed before the labels, before the stories, before the constant need to explain and express. The mystics knew this. That's why they chose silence not as a retreat, but as a reunion with truth. We've explored the ancient wisdom that honors silence as sacred. We've uncovered how it rewires the brain, restores energy, and connects us to something far deeper than words can ever reach. We've seen that silence is not absence, it is presence intensified. It is the temple where the divine speaks in stillness. You now carry that key. You know that in silence, clarity is born, power is preserved, vision is sharpened, and truth rises from within. So take a moment, turn off the noise, step back from the world's demands, and enter that space where nothing needs to be said, where there's no one to impress, no idea to defend, no self to protect, just breath, stillness, awareness. Let silence become your teacher. Let it shape your words, your energy, your life. And if this video resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe and continue this journey into ancient wisdom and living presence. There are more mysteries to uncover and more truths waiting in the spaces between sound. Until then, let your silence speak louder than your voice ever could.